What gods will we see if God of War goes to Egyptian mythology? In this video, we're going to go over 5 gods that we may see if God of War makes this trip. And don't worry if your favorite Egyptian god does not make it on this list, because I have a whole nother video going over 5 different ones that's going to be located at the end of this video, right in the end cards. So let's go check out some Egyptian gods. Number 1, Anubis. We are starting off this list with one of the most famous and well-loved Egyptian gods in the pantheon, and just like many of you, Anubis is a personal favorite. Anubis, who also goes by the name Anpu, is the god of funeral practices, care for the dead, embalming, and the protection of the graves. Anubis is usually seen with the head of a jackal, due to how jackals can frequently be seen around tombs and burial places of the area. With the Egyptians having a massive respect for their dead, Anubis was an important god for the people, but Anubis did have other duties as well. He was also one of the judges of the underworld. Anubis would stand in the Hall of the Two Truths, which was a passing point in the Egyptian afterlife, where he would weigh the hearts of the newly deceased with the scales of judgment against the feather of truth. If the heart of the dead was lighter than the feather of truth, they may pass into the afterlife. But what would happen if the heart was heavier than the feather? If the dead's heart was heavier than the feather of truth, this meant that the dead lived a selfish or bad life, and their soul would be fed to Amut, the devourer of souls. Some say this job was done by Osiris, because later in mythology he did take reign over the underworld after Anubis resurrected him after he had a little mishap with his brother Seth, but before this Anubis would have done this job, and could still do this, but this is up for debate. So a death god with a soul-eating sidekick? How could Anubis not be in God of War if they make it to Egyptian mythology? And it also helps that he is an extremely popular one at that. Number 2, Seth. Okay, there is a lot to unpack with this god and all of the things that he did in mythology, and most of it was not nice. Seth is the son of Geb and Nut, the sky and earth gods, and the brother of Osiris, Isis, and also his own wife Nephthys. Seth is a god of the desert, earthquakes, thunderstorms, eclipses, and somehow the god of foreign lands. I'm not sure how that plays out, but maybe Seth is the ambassador for Egypt. But this is kind of me just theorizing. In Egyptian mythology, Seth became ruler of Egypt after his brother Osiris met his death early in his life and reign. Okay, Seth killed him. Seth put Osiris in a box, drowned him in the Nile River, and just to add insult to injury, had an Osiris butcher party, which would make Jeffrey Dahmer proud, then scattered Osiris's remains throughout Egypt. I mean, come on, Seth, that's a lot, dude. Okay, Seth, put down the knife. Seth, cut it out. Seth! So Seth ruled after all of this happened and would reign for quite a while, until he was met with his greatest opponent yet, the son of Osiris and Isis, the god Horus. And there are many different tellings of how Horus defeated Seth, but more on that in a little bit. After Seth's defeat, he was given a job by the sun god Ra to help him protect the sun as Ra flew it across the sky and through the underworld at night to bring it back to the earth the next day. Okay, so Seth is a huge god from Egyptian mythology and has to be in God of War if the geniuses over in Sony Santa Monica decide to go to Egypt sometime in the future. And the way Seth's story is written, they could play with the story quite a bit if they like. Maybe he was meant to rule over Egypt over Osiris, or maybe he is the god that we have to overthrow in Egyptian mythology. Who knows at this point, but I personally would love to see Seth in a God of War game. Number 3, Sekmet. Okay, Sekmet is another personal favorite of mine from Egyptian mythology, and you're about to find out why. Sekmet is the goddess of many different and various traits, such as the plague, chaos, healing, war, and also the desert sun, because she was said to be created from the fire of Ra's eye when he looked upon the earth. Some say that she is also the daughter of Geb and Nut, but this varies between the sources. In saying this, she is basically the right-hand goddess for Ra, and he uses her to pass on his will in a kind of aggressive way. Basically, when the Egyptian people were going against the laws that Ra laid down for them, he would send Sekmet to put an end to this by slaughtering everyone in her path. And the most famous story with Sekmet says this pretty much exactly. One day the Egyptian people were doing just this, not going by Ra's law, so he sent in Sekmet to handle this. She went into Egypt and just killed everybody. But even worse, she couldn't stop. Sekmet became completely blood drunk, and not even Ra could call her off. So the gods mixed a metric ton of beer mixed with pomegranate juice to make it look like blood and threw it in the Nile River. Sekmet saw this river of fake blood and started to drink from it. She drank and drank until she became completely obliterated and eventually passed out. When she woke up, her rage and her lust for blood had left her completely and she went back to her regular duties. So, who wants to see a bloodlusting goddess in God of War? Personally, I would love to see Sekmet in an Egyptian God of War game, and in my opinion, how could she not be in the game, right? And just so you know, the like and subscribe buttons are blood drunk and on the warpath. Hit them so they'll start slaughtering viewers. Number 4, Horus. So Horus is a very familiar face in Egyptian mythology and goes by a few different names such as Har, Hor, Her, and Heru, and is a god of many different things, but mostly known as the god of the sky, and once again, the god of war. And yes, there are a ton of Egyptian gods associated with war, kind of like the Norse pantheon, which many of the gods are associated with war, which perfect examples of this are Odin, Thor, and Tyr, which Tyr does hold the title of god of war, but that does not mean that the other gods are not associated with war, so just take this into consideration. And just like I promised earlier, here is a famous story of how Horus defeated Seth, which once again comes in different variations, but the results remain the same. So, one way the sources have said that Horus defeated Seth was in an epic battle, where both sides fought with their utmost intensity, which Horus came out on top, but was seriously injured, particularly in his eye, and sought help from the god Toth, who restored Horus's eye, and after his restored eye, or what is also called the Eye of Horus, became a very powerful symbol across the nation. I have also read about a story where the ancient gods of the land sought a trial between Horus and Seth, where they decided who really should rule would be who would conduct unwanted sexual submission upon the other. And I'm leaving the rest of this story right here. If you want to read the rest of it, please feel free to do so. Though, just so you know, reader discretion is advised due to the adult content of the story. But one way or another, Horus did take back his rightful place as ruler of Egypt, and Seth was sentenced to help Ra take and protect the sun across the sky, and also through the underworld. So with how important Horus is to mythology, being the rightful ruler of Egypt, he has to make an appearance in God of War placed in Egyptian mythology, or kind of like they did with God of War 2018 and Ragnarok, Sony Santa Monica may use the story to their advantage, and make another character in Horus's place, just like they did with Atreus. But this is just me speculating once again, and I honestly do want the rightful ruler of Egypt in this game. Number 5, Toth. Toth, which is more of his well-known Greek name, and his Egyptian name is actually this on the screen right here, because I know I'm going to mess this one up, is the god of learning, writing, the moon, languages, wisdom, among other things, and is typically depicted with the head of a ibis bird or a baboon. And there are several different ways Toth was depicted to be born. One source says he was created from Ra's lips at the beginning of creation, and another says he was self-created by the egg of an ibis bird. And Toth's duties are mainly depicting him recording and keeping records, which he does keep record of the weighing of hearts with the gods Anubis and Osiris, kind of like said earlier in this video, as well as give advice to gods and people with common problems. And for all of you huge God of War fans, Toth has already made his way into God of War canon via the Fallen God comics by Dark Horse Comics, where Toth gives Kratos advice of how he cannot run from his destiny, and no one can. This happens several times, and eventually Toth goes to Kratos in his true form, along with Athena in one of Kratos' dreams. Now, I'm not going over any more details from the comics because they are worth your time reading, and I highly recommend doing so, and I just don't want to spoil too much for you if you do want to go out and read them. But with Toth already being in God of War canon, he has to be in an Egyptian game of God of War. So if you did not see your favorite Egyptian god on this list, no worries, I had this video right on screen for you to check out. Everyone, stay safe out there, good night, and happy gaming.